And our presenters are Joy James, Reagan Breitenstein, and Brooke Towner from Appalachian State University, speaking on Rooting for Success, the Impact of Nature Integration in Freshman Orientation. So Joy, Reagan, and Brooke, please take it away.
Thank you, Dorothy and Don, for your thoughtful organization of this event. I'm Joy James from Appalachian State, as Don mentioned, and I'm representing the Recreation Management Program and the Healthy Outdoor Play and Exercise, or HOPE Lab. Our vision for the HOPE Lab is to continue developing scientific foundation for promoting and supporting outdoor physical activity, exercise, and play through interdisciplinary research. With that, we have team members, myself, Reagan Breitenstein from psychology in Appalachian State, and Brooke Towner, who's in health physical education. This project, I want to acknowledge, this project was inspired by the 2024 Campus CNRx Symposium, in particular, Mary Gomes' keynote address about the integration of nature walks into orientation, and the Elon University team's creative approach to incorporating nature into campus activities, such as their stargazing program. I wish we could have done that with our freshman orientation. So following these examples, our team at the Hope Lab began to brainstorm ways to bring campus nature experiences to Appalachian State University's freshman orientation program. Our broad goals were to explore whether connecting new students with nature early in their college journey could positively influence their student wellness, academic success, and maybe the retention in at our university.
So given our inspiration from last year's symposium, like Joy said, that sparked our question, hey, what if we tried something similar or got something going here at App State? And we know from national trends that student well-being is this growing concern. Research shows us there's a decline in both that physical and mental health among college students. And we also see poor mental health, and in turn, that negatively impacts academic performance, their success, and retention. So we began exploring whether nature could be a part of that solution. And there's that strong and growing body of research showing that time spent in nature really supports the physical and that psychological health. So studies linking nature contact with improved mood. We know there's reduced stress, better sleep, enhanced academic focus and performance, and even those higher GPAs. So essentially, nature is this low-cost, high-impact tool that we at universities can integrate into our daily campus life, especially here at App when it's located on or so close to our campus, like our rivers and trails and parks. And so for us, the question became, how can we intentionally create these opportunities for nature engagement right from the start of their college experience here at App State? And that led to the development of our freshman orientation and nature study, which we call the FONS. And if you can imagine us starting our meetings going, hey, every time we got together, that's what happened. But we wanted to really integrate this nature experience and this reflective activity directly into App's freshman orientation sessions. So our study was guided by these three main research questions, and broadly we were looking at, does integrating nature into orientation sessions help improve students' outcome through their college careers? And then more specifically, how does nature engagement or connectedness relate to student academic adjustment and well-being as they transition to college? And can engagement with nature on campus improve the overall college experience and retention? And so I think these questions are beautifully situated at the intersection of health, education, and the environment, which makes this a really cool and exciting interdisciplinary project. And we aren't just interested in those short-term effects, but how this nature-based programming might create a ripple effect on academic success and well-being across the first year of these incoming freshmen. And so to answer these questions, we need students, as we do with all our research projects, and luckily, like Joy said, after being inspired from last year's conference, she had already been in talks with Sarah Garrow, who is amazing, from our new Mountaineer and Family Engagement Office, about incorporating a nature experience into these overnight freshman orientation sessions. And so we seized that opportunity to collaborate with Sarah and her team. And we took this collaborative effort and we highlighted it in an application for an internal grant through App State. And we got it, woohoo, that was wonderful. Because we were able to incentivize our student participation. And after hearing that other faculty members experience low numbers when recruiting students, we thought, how can we get them and reach them in as many ways as possible? And we really used this like three-prong approach where we included initial study information with those freshman orientation emails. So that's why collaborating with Sarah was so important. And then based on the information Sarah relayed to us, we were able to follow up with those interested students with an email, and then a total boots on the ground approach during overnight freshman orientation, where on the first day of check-in, we were there getting them signed up. And then also within orientation, we were given a nature education slot and recruited and during that short presentation. So we were able to incentivize our student participants. They were compensated for this first round of surveys with a $10 Amazon gift card. And then they also will have an opportunity this coming spring to be entered into a raffle for a $50 gift card for completing that follow-up survey, which we're super pumped about. And so now I'll turn it over to Reagan. She's going to talk more about our study design and preliminary findings.
Great, thanks, Brooke. So to expand a little bit on what Brooke described, our study was designed as a quasi-experimental prospective longitudinal study, with the first assessment taking place this past summer and early fall, and the second assessment will be collected starting this coming January, like was mentioned. For the first assessment, we recruited these participants using the methods Brooke described through 3 different overnight orientation sessions with incoming first-year students. At 2 of these overnight orientation sessions, participants were invited to complete a survey either at orientation or sort of around that time, and participated in a nature education session, like was mentioned. In addition, participants were also invited in those first 2 overnight orientation sessions to participate in a nature engagement activity after the nature education session. And then at the last overnight orientation session, participants were only invited to complete the online survey, thus making that last group essentially our control group or condition for the study. And yeah, we'll go to the next slide. So based on the study design and recruitment strategy, we were able to compare participants across 3 different groups. Overall, we recruited 127 participants, with most of them identifying as white, just over about half of them identifying as female, and almost 40% reporting that they come from middle-class backgrounds and families. But we have some reasonable socio-demographic variability in our sample. Regarding these 3 comparison groups that I mentioned in our quasi-experimental design, we have about 20 participants who fall into this control group, about 30 who fall into the group where they completed a survey as well as just the nature education session at orientation, and the remainder of the participants in the condition were exposed to both the nature education session, the nature engagement activity, and they completed the survey. So to be in one of these groups, you had to at the very least complete the survey, but then you might have also had some of these additional conditions dividing you into these groups. So that's sort of what makes this more quasi-experimental in nature, because in some ways there's some self-selection into these groups. It's worth noting that our largest group is that kind of like higher level intervention group, which was surprising to us. We thought it was going to be difficult to recruit students into this group, and they were super excited and really, really invested in this. And so I think that sort of speaks to the power of nature and how engaging some of these activities were that we planned, and was really, really cool for us to see, because we were sort of on the fence and had no idea what to expect in terms of excitement about these activities that we were running. So in terms of materials for our study, the survey, which was given to all participants across all three of those groups, included a number of different measures tapping into various aspects of nature engagement or affinity, including how often participants engaged in nature in the last month, their preference for engaging in different outdoor activities, and how connected they feel to nature. In terms of some of our other college adjustment measures, we asked participants to self-report on things like their recent academic performance and engagement in school, their physical activity, how often they engaged in activity, and what types of physical activity they have been engaging in the last 30 days, their mental health, so things like depressive symptoms, anxiety symptoms, and stress levels, as well as their sleep and other demographic characteristics that might impact their college transition and adjustment. For participants that were exposed to the nature education session in those first two overnight orientation sessions, study staff gave a short 10-minute presentation telling participants about the various different ways that they could engage in and spend time outside in nature, specifically on App State's campus. So what you see here are some screenshots of some of the content that participants were presented. And I guess I should say this is some of the content we plan to present to them. As with all studies, we have road bumps. And the very first time we were going to present this in a overnight orientation session, all of the tech was down in our student union on campus where we were doing this talk for an overnight orientation session. And so I essentially had to give this presentation just orally on the fly. So then we kind of did away with it for the second orientation session to keep it consistent across all of the different groups and make sure they were basically getting exposed to all the same stimuli. So this is the type of things we would have shown them. These are the things that we talked about in our presentation, just to give you an idea. And you can see here some nice screenshots of App State as well and how beautiful our campus is. And it's sort of what it looks like right now, actually. So for participants who were exposed to that nature engagement activity at one of the first two overnight orientation sessions, study staff guided participants in small groups through 5 different outdoor activities on campus. And the first activity was a sound map in which participants were given paper and a pencil and asked to listen and reflect on the sounds that they hear around them and draw pictures or images that represent what they hear. You can see an example of this sort of right in the middle of the slide with that white paper and the green writing. So that's a real-time shot of a participant who completed a sound map for us. And then we had the group sort of discuss what these sounds sort of meant to them and what they picked up on. The second activity was a brief mindfulness meditation session that took place on outdoor blankets by a kind of little creek that runs through campus. Um, then after that mindfulness meditation session, participants talked in small groups about how they felt this activity was grounding to them and how it helped connect them to nature. The next activity was a crowd favorite, and it was called Nature Art, and it challenged participants to work in teams or individually to find objects in nature that could be used to create a picture or a work of art on the sidewalk. And you can see multiple examples of what participants created here on this slide, or at least one. We have lots of other pictures too. It was hard to choose just one, but here's an example of one on the far right side. The fourth activity was called Nature's Palette, and it asked participants to write down as many natural colors that they could see around them in nature and discuss with the group which colors surprised them and why. And then finally, participants discussed in a small group different smartphone apps and ways in which we could use technology to engage with nature, such as finding local hiking trails through all trails or identifying different bird calls or identifying plants through using your smartphone and different hardware that was already built in to your phone software or other apps.
And Reagan and colleagues, we are going to need to
Oh,
wrap up.
okay. Well, this is our last slide essentially.
Great.
So for some of our preliminary findings from this first assessment point, we conducted some preliminary correlations for the entire sample. So these results do not really reflect comparisons or differences between some of those groups in our study that we've identified, but early correlations do show that students who reported more time spent in nature in the last month were more physically active and had better mental health. So lower levels of depressive symptoms, lower levels of stress, and lower levels of anxiety symptoms. So in some ways, we've already replicated some of the prior literature showing the positive effects of nature on mental and physical health.